Hello, and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else happens to come to mind during the course of the conversation. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, so joining me today is Bryan from No Beer Left Behind podcast. If you could, Bryan, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and hey, how did you decide that you wanted to do a podcast about beer?
Awesome. Well, first, thanks for having me, Rob. I started in the beer industry, actually work in the beer industry now for the last 8 years. Really started my love of home brewing, the curiosity of home brewing, really, and wanting to learn more about brewing and beer in general. So went in and found the Certified Cicerone program and was like, hey, sounds like something I want to do. I want to be a certified Cicerone. This is 2013. And while looking through there, I actually found my job was a sponsor, or, the company I work for now was a sponsor in that certified Cicerone program. And with the hopes of creating better beer stewards in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area here in Texas. So I started working in beer then and continued home brewing. And 8 years later, decided somewhere in between to start a podcast with some buddies who we missed hanging out with each other after college, and we found this thing called the internet and podcasting. And we're like, hey, we're really interesting guys, and you know what, I bet people would just love to hear us talk about beer and current events. And that was 6 years ago, so or almost 6 years ago. And while we don't have the biggest following, I guarantee we have the most loyal following in all things craft beer podcasting and current events, shoe talk, soccer talk, you name it, we're talking about it. So
Awesome. Yeah, well, I can't say that this show is gonna to help garner you any more fans for your show, because right now I'm just getting started and I think I've got 70 subscribers. So you got to start somewhere though. So
hey, and you know what, I one of the reasons that I wanted to be on here is just the work that you're doing and the people you have on, like to be included in the likes of Ren Navarro from Twitter. Like that's pretty cool. Like I'm following the work they're doing. I am nowhere near the clout that they have and the good that they're bringing to the world. But what you're doing about opening people's eyes to the history of certain styles, I think it's really important for people to know. And the more people you reach, the better we are going to be as a beer community.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit something that Ren is local to me. She lives 35 minutes from me. So we're Twitter friends. And, as soon as all this pandemic stuff's done, her and her family are coming over and we're having a big barbecue with a bunch of my other beer Twitter friends. And, so it was a real simple to get her on because she, like I said, she's local. So
hey, you don't have to break down that wall. You could just leave it as like I'm awesome on the internet.
I'm so damn awesome that everybody just wants to be on my show. Actually, it's pretty funny. I put out a call for people to be on the second set of recordings that I was doing, and I expected to get 5-6 people. Like I got 10 last time, and it was hard to get those 10. Man, I got 37 people. I'm still trying to get everybody scheduled and everything. It's nuts. It's like I was expecting 5. I got 6 or 7 times that.
Congratulations. Now here's some more work to do. Like
right, exactly.
That's awesome.
All right. So let's just get started. Today we're going to be talking about Schwarzbier. Now a little bit of thing up front. I was not able to get a German Schwarzbier, so I had to settle for a Czechoslovakian variant.
Okay.
Falls in the same exact family, uses the same malts, but the water profile is going to be different, obviously, because it's not coming from Germany. It's coming from the Czech Republic.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I was going to cover just in general about the style is the availability of it to get a true German style is difficult. I even had difficulty finding some here in North Texas. We get a ton of different beers. Um, and full disclosure, the one example that I could get, I've had several times before, and it gets pretty beat up in its journey to the central United States from Germany. So,
Yeah.
do we want to go into the beers that we have then?
Yeah. So I will be drinking Czechvar
Okay.
dark lager. Comes from the Czech Republic. It's only brewed in the Czech Republic. So, um, it's much like Guinness. If you're drinking a Czechvar, you're drinking one that came from the source.
Yep. Absolutely. So I am lucky in that while I don't have many actual German styles or German examples of Schwarzbier, and I'll pronounce it Schwarzbier. Um, we had an actual discussion on our last podcast where my co-host asked me the pronunciation. I was like, listen, just like everything else American, in particular Texan, we're going to bastardize the word in the pronunciation. It's just going to happen. Like, technically,
Yeah.
we were going to be calling it Schwarzbier. I'm not going to call it Schwarzbier because I sound like an absolute ass when I say it. But, like we say on No Beer Left Behind, like, drink the beer you want to drink the way you want to drink it, say it the way you want to say it. And as long as someone doesn't come at you and is like, oh, actually, it's very, like, it's, you
Right.
call it
Well,
what you want.
you call it Schwarzbier. I call it Schwarzbier. The true Germans call it Schwarzbier.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know what we mean.
Yeah, exactly. It's a black beer.
It's a
Um,
black lager.
yep.
Exactly.
So the one I'm drinking here in North Texas, I actually have three examples of local versions of this.
Very
And
nice.
we can actually talk about why that is here in Texas in just a second. So tonight, or today, whatever time it is we're recording, whatever time you're watching, I
It's
am
the
actually
internet. There is no time.
I am drinking Over Yonder Black Lager from Revolver Brewing. And
Nice.
Revolver Brewing is out of Granbury, Texas, and made headlines a couple years ago when Molson Coors purchased the majority share of Revolver. Revolver's got a special place in my heart. I used to live in Granbury, right around the lake from this brewery when they opened. Grant Wood, former head brewer at Sam Adams, was one of the founding members of Revolver Brewing. Grant helped develop the flagship beer, Revolver Blood and Honey, which when you come to North Texas, I mean, it's kind of like a staple. It's the, it's really, it's a classic Texas beer in that really only brewed in Texas year round, and it uses Texas sourced ingredients, mainly honey sourced from about a 200-mile radius from the brewery. So really cool, unique beer, unique brewery. And even though Molson Coors is the majority shareholder, every drop of liquid is still brewed in Granbury, Texas. They actually have one of the first heads of innovation at Molson Coors, first female head of innovation at Molson Coors is out at Revolver, and she's doing an amazing job of bringing some new beer styles into their portfolio.
Cool.
Yeah, so Over Yonder, just when it's described as a classic Schwarzbier, this is it. Like, just pitch black, can't see through it. This is actually one of the darker versions of the style that I've ever seen. Most of them come in at like this really dark ruby color.
Mm-hmm.
And when people think black, they're like, oh, it's going to be Guinness dark or it's going to be Imperial Stout dark. Not actually, because another name for this beer is Black Pills. So it is has a lighter mouth feel, a lighter body than you would expect when you see a beer this dark. It's one of those, tricks of brewing magic.
Right.
Um,
It looks like it should be a stout, but it
yeah,
tastes like a pilsner.
and that is exactly why it is one of my favorite beers to drink. Actually, one of the first styles of beer that got me into beer because of that like head game. It was actually by another local brewer who recently discontinued their Schwarzbier. Bums me out. But Raw Brewing in Fort Worth has made a Schwarzbier since they opened in like 2008, 2006, something like that.
Hmm.
And it was called Ugly Pug. Fantastic name for a beer. But it was almost pitch black, really, really dry, a little more roasted character and a little higher alcohol than typical German styles. But, American styles of Schwarzbier are going to be that. They're a little more robust and a little over the top. I'm
Just
not
like
going to.
America.
You said it. I didn't have to, but
Well,
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
technically speaking, I am an American citizen, so I can still say stuff like that
I
and
mean,
do it with impunity.
when you're speaking the truth, anybody could say it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's the thing about the truth. It doesn't care what you think.
exactly. The reason that you see a lot of these, in particular, German black lagers here in Texas, is because German black lagers pair really, really well with meat.
Yeah, barbecue.
And Texans love themselves some brisket, some ribs, some any meat that once was living, any food that once was living. Texans are down for it. And if you can throw some char or some smoke on there, all those flavors are going to be complemented perfectly with the roasted malts found in a black lager.
Right.
So it's actually like when we call it a black pills, it's really perfect definition for it, because majority of this beer is Pilsner malt, Munich malt, and then some roasted malts thrown in on top. There's some American brewers who use a steeping method where they cold steep their roasted grains, so that they can extract the color and none of the like weird, harsh, astringent flavors.
Right. Yep. So for anyone who doesn't know, Schwarzbier, the roots of Schwarzbier lie in the region of Germany called Thuringia, and then to a lesser extent Saxony.
And Franconia.
Well,
I bring that up because there's a brewer here in North Texas who would flip his shit if it wasn't included.
Gotcha.
It's a whole thing.
So the oldest known black beer to come out of Germany is Braunschweiger Mama, which translated to English means Brunswick Mom. It's been brewed since the Middle Ages, and the first known recorded instance of this beer style was in 1390. So black beers have been around for a long time. The earliest mass-produced version of this beer was by Kettstritzer brewery out of Germany. They started in 1534, and they still make it today, and it's a fantastic beer.
And see, that is the one German example that we continue to get here in North Texas, and it is the one German example of the beer that I am consistently disappointed by. But it's because I know what it should taste like.
Yeah, and by the time it gets to you, it doesn't taste like that anymore.
No, and unfortunately, that has led to some style shifts, which is common in the craft beer industry, especially when you're talking about these really niche styles that are found, half the globe away. By the time they get here, people will drink them and be like, "Oh, this is what this beer is supposed to taste like," and they will brew a beer that tastes like that. Unfortunately, that's not always the case of how the beer should taste.
Right.
So by the time Kostritzer gets here, it's like sweet. It's oxidized, so it has that like wet cardboard. Well, when wet cardboard mixes with dark malts, it creates this weird, like, just cloyingly sweet nastiness. And they only sell it in bottles here, so it's even worse. It's a thing.
So so you get the light playing with it and things like that. Now, when we can get it here in Canada, it's in cans. So it's still not as good as having it in Germany, but it's much better than when it comes in a bottle because it doesn't get all the light playing through it and everything like that.
I always tell people because here in Texas we run into some really, we'll call them headstrong people who want to think that beer should only be in bottles. And you're like, okay, well, if you had the choice between bottle or draft, which would you take? Well, draft all day. It's better on draft. I was like, cool. So it comes out of a keg, right? Yeah. What's a can but a mini keg?
That's right.
I'm left with people just staring at me going, well, I could taste the aluminum. Like, well, okay, you're the one person on the planet who can taste aluminum because there's and then I get into like plastic coatings on the inside and they just blank stare, walk away. I literally was at a pouring event where I was, sampling beer for people. And the first person who stepped up That was their argument. And I was like, this is going to be a long night. Honestly, it's going to be tough. I'm about to fight some people, I think, over beer.
It's going to go down.
It is.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, so this beer style, it looks like we talked about earlier. It looks dark. It looks menacing. It's actually really light. Majority of the malts in here, Munich malt and Pils malt. And to your point earlier, where you're talking about Czech dark lager is a comparable style to this beer, to Schwarzbier. You talked about the main difference is the water profile and the water chemistry. One thing for people to take note of, and especially if you're learning about, if you want to take a journey down the BJCP Beer Judge Certification Program or the Cicerone program, changing the water profile will change how hops show up in a beer.
Very much so.
So with Czech Dark Lager, you're probably going to find a more pronounced hop character than you do in Schwarzbier.
Yep.
The style of hops may be the same, Zatz hops, Hallertau, through and through, but the way they show up in the finished beer is going to be far more balanced in Schwarzbier, because like everything that Germans do to the T, malt, alcohol, and hops are all really balanced well together. Not any one of them stand out, but they'll all play off of each other really well, keeping it about that 5% ABV range.
Yep. Yeah. So modern Schwarzbiers are made using a cool fermentation like lagers. Traditionally, before the 1600s, though, traditionally they were used. They were done with a warmer ferment, so they were more of an ale style.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. Alcohol content is acceptable for these beers between 4.4 and 5.4% ABV, and they get their dark color from dark roasted malts, which, depending on which malts the brewer decides to use, they can add a little bit of bitterness or a little bit of coffee flavor if they don't, like you were saying, cold press it just to get the color out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The overall flavor should just be bittersweet to lightly sweet. It shouldn't be an overly sweet beer.
Yeah, and the other things that come out of those dark malts, modern brewers have the availability of using dehusked or debittered black malts, so that you don't get those astringent or like what I call ashtray flavors coming off the beer. American brewers in particular who decide to go out and try to make their own Schwarzbier, sometimes that will come off that way. They're used to making stouts and they're like, oh, more is better. Let's do this. Honestly, if you're using a delicate malt like Pilsner or Munich, they don't play well with those big roasty flavors. So you have to be very careful in using the delicate touch of brewers who've been doing this for 700 years.
Right. All right. So mine, not quite as pitch black as yours. In the light, you can see all around the edges, it's got that dark auburn ruby color to it. So it looks almost black, but it's really a super dark red brown. Mm-hmm. Very little aroma coming off this, which is what you would expect from this style of beer. There shouldn't be much. You shouldn't have any of that fruity esters. You shouldn't have any of those weird off phenol type smells. It shouldn't be hazy, but it's going to be dark, so you shouldn't be able to really see through it. So you're not really going to know if it's hazy or not, unless you're doing this, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say once you turn it on its side and you do the white paper test, you can see how clear it is. And any well brewed German beer is going to be brilliantly clear, regardless. So the one thing that I didn't, maybe I slept on this fact with you. So actually, this is one of my favorite styles to brew as a home brewer. Do you cover that on this section of the cast?
We cover whatever comes to mind. That's the beauty of this show. We talk about the beer, we talk about the history and the style, and whatever else tangents we go on, we go on. I mean, I've had beer conversations that started out talking about IPAs and somehow ended up talking about stouts and porters and barrel aged beers. You know, it's just how it goes.
Well, I actually humble brag from the absolute depths of humble bragginess here. I actually brewed this beer and got some really, really critical feedback from someone who I dearly respect in the beer world. So Ray Daniels, the founder of the Certified Cicerone program, was actually teaching a Cicerone class here in Dallas at one of the local breweries. And I was invited there. Day one of the class, I'm just annoying him with questions in between his, teaching. At the end of day one, I was like, "Hey, Ray, Mr. Daniels, I don't know how to bring this up, but I have some beer. Could you taste it and give me some feedback?" The most nervous I've ever been in my life, right? Because I mean, this dude founded what it's like to, he founded the program that is all things
Right.
beer in my
That
world.
is all things beer connoisseur.
Yeah. So I was like, "I've got 2 beer styles. Do you mind tasting them?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely. Bring them in. We'll taste them after class tomorrow." And I then literally skipped back to my car, and was driving home, calling my wife. I was like, "This is the coolest thing in the world. Ray Daniels is going to taste my beer." And she's like, "Who's Ray Daniels?" I'm
Great.
like, "Ah,
Yeah.
God." So,
Congrats.
yeah. She's like, "Cool. Are you going to stop by and get milk? We need eggs too." I'm like, "All right, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll take care of that." So no, I had the next day I had Ray taste my Schwarzbier that I had brewed. I affectionately named it after my dog at the time, who's now passed. Mainly because it was the first beer. Like, it used to sit beers down next to the couch while we're watching TV or whatever. This is the only beer that my dog ever showed interest in, and caught him taking drinks out of. And I was like, "Okay, you got to stop that. You can't be doing that." So
That's right. That's my glass. Let
yeah,
me pour it in your bowl.
yeah, I'm like, just give me. All you got to do is ask. You don't have to be rude. No, so it was Boomerang Black Lager, and I poured him a glass. He tasted it, and the first words out of his mouth were, "What hops did you use?" And I was like, "Oh God." I was like, "Well, Mr. Daniels, I took the recommendation of my homebrew shop, because the homebrew shop was all out of Hallertau hops.
Oh
They're
no.
Yeah, so they were like, "Trust me, just use Tetning, just use some other." It was like some weird British hop that had like neutral character. They're like, "You just need some bittering, you're fine." I was like, "Okay." Admittedly, at the time, I did not know I was brewing a beer that Ray Daniels would be tasting later on. So I give them some break, and also my own ignorance should be acknowledged as being lovely, not taken as any sort of a slight against Ray or anybody else who drank my beer. But yeah, no, it was to the, like, his tasting was so on point that, like I said, he knew that there was something up. There was a hop that was out of place. And from that point on, I was like, well, we're only brewing with the ingredients that I know should be in the beer. And that's all. But what is interesting, that was the first beer that I had ever lagered. So those of you who homebrew know that lagering is really tough to do on a personal scale. Like, it's difficult. Um, but I use the Narcisse method of lagering, which is lagering, fermenting a little bit warmer than the typical, like, 35, 40 degrees. And I also do it much faster. So I was able to produce this lager in about 2 weeks, with no off
Wow.
flavors from the yeast at all, which is the biggest complaint from most brewers and home brewers especially, is the attenuation of the yeast, and then the cleanup after itself. It's painfully long process. But
Yes.
the Narcisse method is much faster, and it yields a very clean product. And to your point about brilliance and color and clarity, uh, you're still cold crashing it. I run finings through mine, and then transfer over to keg, and it's just a brilliantly clear, zero sulfur, no weird, no weird off smells or flavors coming out of the fermentation process. So please go. Like, my one suggestion is, if you're a home brewer, brew this beer style. You will not regret it, because it literally pairs with every food that you can imagine, and it will blow some of your friends' minds whenever they see it and
Yep.
taste it.
Another beer, to get a little bit off track on beers, another beer that goes fantastic with grilled and barbecued food is American Amber Ale.
Mm.
Um, the roasted caramel malts that are used in that pair so nicely with the caramelized proteins in your barbecue. So
Yep. We're we're actually getting ready to launch Yingling down here in Texas in a couple of weeks. And
Ooh.
it's one of those things that like when you start looking at like, okay, well, like what food would pair with Yingling lager, because it's an amber lager for those of you who have never tasted it. It's just a lager, but it is amber in color, and the difference that that makes whenever you have a just a you know a hamburger with some char marks on it, and you take that nice like caramely roasted sip of a beer, you're like, oh my god, that's that's a match made in heaven. And you realize that caramelized flavors go with just about everything or cut just about everything
Yeah.
uh, in food. It's wonderful.
All right, so we talked about this a little bit already, but we were talking about hops in the beer.
Mm-hmm.
When you're smelling this beer, when you're tasting this beer, the hop aroma and flavor for this style should be very low to imperceptible.
Right.
Because you should only be using noble hop varieties when you're making this style of beer, and the bitterness overall should be on the low to low medium. So it's not going to be a beer. It's not going to be like an IPA where you drink it, you're like, oh, you get that kick at the end. This is going to be this. I mean, this, like you said, this was your first real foray into other beer styles. This is just, think of it as a black Miller or a black Bud if you're one of those people that doesn't want to venture outside of your macro beers. Think of this as a good style to dip your toe in the water with, because you're not going to be overly surprised by the flavor. You're going to be, oh, this tastes a lot like what I'm used to. It might have a little bit more depth of flavor than you're used to, but it's going to be that same kind of clean profile that you're used to.
Oh, absolutely. So, the other thing, so it sounds like you and I had kind of did our research in the same locations. So using the BJCP style guide, as well as Brewing Classic Styles by Jamil Zainasheff, and then even dipping my toe into John Palmer's How to Brew book to find.
I love John Palmer's book.
Fantastic. But one of the things that I like, it always says in these style guides, the pronounced hop character, and like especially for Schwarzbier here. Pronounced hop character compared to what would be a better inclusion in these books, because
water.
Yeah, exactly. Because compared to other German styles, I guess sure it's a little more bitter. I don't know that bitterness is coming from all hops, but like when you compare it to when you compare it to American beer styles, you name it, I don't know, you just pick an American beer style, and it's not hoppy at all. But compared to other German styles, other Central European lager styles in particular, it can be more. It can have more hop character.
Well, yeah, it does, and I'm not saying that there's none, because on the very back end, when you open your mouth and you go, you get just a tiny little tickle of, hey, there was hops in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
which is great. If you're not looking for a beer that's an IPA, it's going to punch you in the mouth going, I'm here and I'm bitter and you're going to know about it.
Yeah. American. Is that what you said? I think you described that as that is just
American beer.
American beer.
American beer.
One of those other, it's funny because this beer style, like I said, it was a gateway for me. Another beer style, made by another Texas brewer here, made by St. Arnold out of Houston, is their Lawnmower, which is a Kolsch style beer. And for brewers, who are familiar with the style, Kolsch is just I don't know, it's like the fancy, it's a German version of a blonde ale, but it's fancier. You know what I mean? It's a hybrid style, so it's ale lager hybrid. You ferment it weirdly. It has fruit notes, but they don't come from the esters of the yeast. It's a whole thing.
It's a weird beast.
But St. Arnold used to make, and I haven't seen it in years, so I'm assuming they've discontinued it. They used to make a beer called Santo. Santo is a black Kolsch.
Interesting.
A wonderful combination of beer styles. Because, like we've talked about in this whole session, Schwarzbiers have a nice, rich, roasty character, but not overpowering, doesn't stick to your tongue after you swallow. It's just gone. It's there, compliments, and is out the door. It's like a good guest at your house.
That's right. Well, you know what they say about guests and fish, right? They both stink after 3 days.
There you go. That's good. That's good. I'm going to start using that. gonna start using that one.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So this beer has a very soft body when you're drinking it, and the finish should be a short to medium length finish. So you should know that you drank a beer, but it shouldn't stick around long enough that you're going, I gotta drink something else to get this out of my mouth. Like even if it's more beer.
Yeah. I always like those beers. It's kind of how I judge my personal preference rating is if the beer leaves you wanting another taste of that beer. And like when you get a clean example of this beer style in particular, it's just you can drink them literally all day, and the relatively low ABV helps that. I mean, that's my obsession with Guinness in general is with that as like, hey, it's 3.8 to 4.2% alcohol by volume. It's 125 calories per 12-ounce serving. It is gold in my eyes.
It's around here we call that a summer stout.
Yep.
My wife still vehemently denies that there's any such thing as a summer stout. So I've had to acquiesce and start calling them session stouts.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you can see my background behind me, but I collect Guinness artwork.
Nice.
And like anything Gilroy is gold. The Guinness in general is my baby. Like I absolutely adore that beer. Guinness Draft, Guinness Extra Stout, and foreign export. Their porters, all those things are nice, but Guinness Draft is literally where it's at. And that's a beer that I find myself in situations where I'm pouring beer or suggesting beer to people who are not beer drinkers. And Guinness Draft is always my go-to of like it's a mind bender in and of itself. You pour it. I hear people talk about it's bread in a can, or it's like oil. It's like oil being poured out. I'm like, bro, one, you have no idea. I can tell immediately that they've never had a barrel aged stout if they're considering Guinness oil in a can. You're just like, okay.
Right.
Like
no, but it is. I've often said that drinking old school Guinness is like drinking a loaf of bread in a can because it's got that really malty, really bready flavor to it. So,
but it's also playing with your eyes too, because like when you see something that is pitch black, you're like, this is gonna be heavy, but it's not. It literally gets its bitterness in a lot of the same ways that Schwarzbier gets its bitterness, or color, I should say, the way that Schwarzbier gets its color. The other thing that blows people's minds with Guinness, what would you say the IBU is on Guinness Draft, the International Bitterness Unit?
I was just looking at it the other day. I don't remember what it is. I know it's not what you're going to think it is. I could cheat and pull one of the cans out of the cooler over here. But
so the other thing about Guinness, at least here in America, is Guinness Draft in can. There's no ABV on it. Don't know why. And there's also no other stats on it. But the IBU for Guinness Draft is around 80, which for a 4% beer, it's going to be, that would be incredible. Like that would be incredibly bitter. But it's not.
You would think, but it's not.
Because it's nitrogenated. It's a much softer bitterness on the end. Whereas if you have carbonated beer,
very creamy.
Yeah. If you have carbonated beer, the carbonic acid that it hits your tongue, same thing like if you drink seltzer water, Topo Chico, whatever you're drinking, it has that like stinging sensation across your tongue. By the way, it looks like my video is frozen. I apologize about that, but I hope at least my audio is coming through.
Yeah, no, and it'll be fine. The way my recording studio works is it records locally to your machine and then uploads it after we're done talking. So even if the internet feed to me and you looks like it's frozen, chances are it's going to be fine for the video. So
on my end, it looks like I'm making a very particular point. So
you are you're like, and let me tell you,
I do get passionate when I talk Guinness, but the bitterness, it needs to be upped substantially so you don't have that cloyingly sweet finish in a beer that's nitrogenated versus carbonated that has those stinging carbonic acid experience across your tongue. So Guinness is another one of those like mind melting beers, especially Guinness Draft. I absolutely love it. I heard y'all talking about Guinness on a previous podcast. I can't remember who it was with. You were talking about it. But
I don't know. So many of these things evolve into stouts and porters.
I was going to say your podcast schedule. You've been talking basically since you put out that tweet about 2 weeks ago. So I don't envy your memory at the moment. But no, y'all were talking about Guinness and why it's consumed in so many places. Guinness has a reach, and when Guinness comes into a culture, it comes into a country, it comes into the culture. It's why Guinness is consumed in a lot of places that you're like, why on God's green earth are you drinking a foreign export stout in the Caribbean islands? Because that's where that beer is made, and that's the people there drink the stuff that is made by them. It's
Yep.
the beer that is consumed in Northern Africa. One of the I think the largest Guinness brewery outside of St. James Gate is in Northern Africa, because that's like they came into the continent, they wanted to brew beer, they employed a lot of people, they provided clean drinking water to a lot of people, and guess what? Like it's literally a drink that provides life for a lot of places. And
It
I
is.
think that's the beauty of beer is that when you find a story like Sir Arthur Guinness in general, who is like, oh my God, the dude was a full on philanthropist, like literally would do anything for the people who surrounded him and the people who made his business work. Like, if you've never heard the story of Guinness, there's a book called Search for God in Guinness, and they cover the history of Arthur Guinness and all the things that he has done, or he did, I'm sorry, and that his brewery continues to do
All
to
the
this
things he
day.
had done.
Did.
Had done did.
Yeah. Welcome to Texas, everybody. But it's true. And these stories are all around the beer world in general, and they're the stories that I love to hear. I love to learn more about, and because they should affect the way that we those stories in particular should be the only non-beer related things that affect the way that we buy beer. Like it's easy to put your money where your mouth is when it comes to good beer. Guinness is one of those things, obviously. But when you can put more of your money to good causes behind good beer, like Guinness is that for me.
Yeah.
They're just a fantastic company.
Hey, all right. Let's get back on track a little bit here. So,
yeah, thank you for coming to my Guinness TED Talk. Something you hear no joke when you talked about things like always just tangenting into porters and stouts. On the No Beer Left Behind podcast, you will hear at least probably once a quarter Bryan just devolve into Guinness Talk 101, 102. I think we're up to graduate level Guinness degrees over on the podcast after 6 years. So I
you have your
apologize.
GPHD. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, yeah. So, I've actually been to the St. James Gate facility. My wife and I were over in Ireland 2 years ago, and we hit Guinness and we hit Jameson, and
Nice.
we did all that fun stuff. But yeah, so getting a little bit back to Schwarzbier.
Yes.
For people who want to be fancy, who want to be in the know. Schwarzbier should typically be served in a fluted style glass. Now, mine is a semi-fluted Pilsner style glass here. It's not a true fluted glass, but I will say this is one of those Spiegel super thin, super fancy glasses that I had 6 of them. I'm down to 3 because you tap it wrong and it breaks, or if you're me, you wear a watch that has a quartz, not a quartz, I can't think of the material that the face is made out of, and you hit the glass and it hits that resonant frequency and causes it to shatter. Yeah.
Yep.
I've done that twice with my expensive glasses. I hit it with my watch and it's like bing.
I think
yes,
that's every beer lover's experience with that.
Yeah, so it should be served in a fluted style glass. And it should be served between 7 and 13 degrees Celsius, which is 45 to 55 degrees for the people using freedom units.
I do want to talk about the fact that so in my depth of research over the last week, I pulled up my brewing logs using the Narcisse lagering method. And I was like, if it comes up, I'll have the stats ready. And I write everything down. And I was like, wait, he's in Canada. I get to do the Celsius conversions for this one. Let's go. And then I'm just gonna be honest. There's a lot of numbers to be thrown out, and people aren't gonna be able to follow along. And then I was like, we'll just cut it. But I have it written down. I did the Celsius conversions.
Very, very nice. Well, so here's one of the things I've learned since moving to Canada. Canada's not as metric as they'd like the world to think they are. My wife works in plumbing wholesale, and they still deal with things that are in inches and feet because most of their supply comes from where? The U.S.
America.
That's right. So, they know what 1.5-inch pipe is. They know what a 3-inch pipe is. People around here, they have their house thermometers set at Fahrenheit, and they have their stoves set in Fahrenheit. Even though outside it says it's 35 degrees, which, is like 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, their house is set to 72 degrees Fahrenheit for the air conditioning.
See, this is what we need, Rob. We need more people like you. People infiltrating the metric system and be like, guys, no. They're still using Fahrenheit back here. Letting the people know.
Well, what's funny is a lot of the grocery stores up here, they'll advertise food like ground beef is on sale for X per pound. But when you go to the store, the price is per kilogram on the label, but the sale price on the thing says per pound. So it's a crazy messed up world up here because back in the 80s, United States and Canada are both like, hey, let's go metric like the rest of the world. Canada's like, great, we're going metric, and America's like, yeah, about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of math. I don't like doing that. I will say every American who's driven into Canada has that full-on panic moment when they see the first speed limit sign that comes up, and it's in kilometers per hour, and everybody has to get the readers out to find out what the little numbers are inside the big numbers of the old speedometer. It is terrifying when you're riding through Canada with your father, who is chain smoking with a Nicorette patch on, trying to find an AM, like conservative talk AM radio station, and also trying to figure out how fast, like what 120 kilometers is. Like, it's not miles per hour. Doesn't equal the same thing. So just let off the gas there, Tom.
Just remember that 80 is 50, 100 is 63.
Oh, that's good. That's such a round number of 63. I love that.
Well, technically it's 62.5, but they won't fault you for that extra half mile per hour.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because one of the conversions I had was 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit is the initial fermentation degrees. And then I converted it. I was like, well, it's 10 to 12.773 degrees Celsius. So I'm just
say 13.
Yeah. Well, I thought that, and I was like, no, that's some American shit. I'm going to go 12.8. So I'm glad to know that 13 is still acceptable.
That's right. Yeah. It's funny. So I've lived in Canada now for just over 3 years. And one of the biggest questions I get from a lot of people is, well, isn't it cold there? I'm like, motherfuckers, I moved 150 miles north and 350 miles east. No, it's no colder. It's like living in fucking Milwaukee.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like, no, there's some cold ass places in the States. Like, it's not like you move from Miami to Toronto. Like that would be a difference. That's a shock. But if
I moved from Rockford, Illinois, which is northern Illinois. It's just about as far north in the state of Illinois as you can get without being in Wisconsin. So, this is the same exact everything.
Just on the other side of the lakes. That's it. That's really that's
yeah. The biggest things that are different up here for me is speed limits are in metric, and every denomination of their money is a different color, and it's made of plastic.
I mean, you know what? Money always kills me. Like, we went to the Dominican Republic for my co-host Frank's wedding, and we went down there and we're like, okay, what's the conversion rate? And I was like, screw the conversion rate. What the hell are we holding here in our hands? Because their money is the same way. Like, their paper money is just plastic and is like see-through in some areas. I'm like, what the hell is this? It's not color coded, at least. I mean, loonies are at least that's unless you're colorblind. Now we're throwing a different wrench into the mix here, because if you're colorblind, what do you do then? Like, is it? I mean, I guess it's marked numbers.
Oh yeah,
too,
no, yeah.
right?
There's like a $5 bill's got a big
Okay.
Big motherfucking 5 all over the damn thing.
So I have cousins who they're brothers. They're both really good mechanics, auto mechanic and motorcycle mechanic. However, they're both colorblind and differently colorblind, and have ruined several really expensive pieces of equipment by hooking up the wrong color wires to the wrong color wires because they all look the same. So it's hilarious when you hear people are like, "Oh no, this is everything's color matched." I'm like, "Well, is it?" Because if you can't tell the difference between orange, brown, and red, is it color matched? Is it?
It might be.
Yeah, maybe. So
All right, so
we've devolved further away from
oh yeah,
Schwarzbier.
no. Well, this happens on every show, and that's the beauty of this show. It's supposed to be pretty light, pretty. It's not supposed to hit people in the face with details. It's like, here's the basic history. Here's how it should taste. Here's what it's comparable to. Oh, and here's a bunch of other shit that we decided we want to talk about while we're talking.
Sounds like the people who listen to your show would really like No Beer Left Behind as well.
Probably.
Yeah. A little bit longer format. You throw it on, not pay attention, and then catch right back up. So that's us.
So some examples of other breweries that make this style of beer. We already said Ketstriger or Ketstritzer.
Yeah. Or the Texan pronunciation is Kostritzer. And that's fine too.
Kostritzer, yeah. But it's got the umlaut, so it's got that sound. And I'd be remiss because until I was 13, I was actually fluent in German because I'm only second generation born in North America. So
that's awesome. Allegedly, I am too. My ancestry DNA does not say as much as that, but I'm third generation German American.
Yeah. So then Sam Adams Black Lager. It's technically a Schwarzbier. New Belgian 1554 is a black lager. And then hailing from Texas, Shiner Bohemian Black,
which is actually what I'm drinking now.
I love Shiner beer. I used to get the every year at Christmas they released a black beer. I can't think of the name of it now.
So they release now. It is Cheer that they release, and it's a darker lager, but it's spiced with peaches, pecans, all things Texas. Their black lager, Bohemian Black Lager, was actually the basis for my Schwarzbier recipe that I built out for homebrew, because it is so. Anytime you hear kind of those life pro tips, anytime you hear Bohemian thrown into a beer style, it just means, just think of it as Belgian. Okay, so in beer breweries, or like in brewers speak, it's like it's a lager technically, may not taste quite like a lager. It's got some things in there, so we'll just call it a Bohemian lager. It's meant to be a little bit outside the style.
Well, I mean,
when compared to other strict German styles.
Yeah, and there actually was a region called Bohemia. So I mean, I just recorded a show 4 episodes ago on Bohemian Pilsner. So,
Bo Pils is fucking amazing. Wasn't sure if we can cuss on here, but I heard you drop the F.
I don't have any monetization or anything like that, so I don't give a rat's ass. You want to swear?
I don't give a dookie. No, Bo Pils is freaking amazing. It's one of those sleeper styles that whenever I see a local to me brewer make a Bo Pils, I'm going for it, because I've never had one that was. You know what? As I'm saying that sentence, I'm just going to knock on wood. I've never had a bad example of that style from local.
Now
brewers.
You've cursed yourself.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to get like 6 bad ones in a row. But no, they're fantastic. I love those beers.
Another fantastic example of a Schwarzbier is Black Bavarian by Sprecher Brewery out of Milwaukee.
Okay.
So
I was going to say I've had a lot of people tell me how good Devil's Backbone is. Their Schwarzbier that they make, and they make I think it's won at the GABF for like 6 years in a row. Like, I don't even know if they enter anymore. But Devil's Backbone is one of those just like strict lager breweries or German lager breweries here in the States. So, no, and the other thing is, I think what what we might have uncovered here is that while Schwarzbier has a definitive style, has a definitive set of taste parameters and aromas and even guidelines, IBU, SRM, and ABV, it's still a very good style, like an easy style to be brewed elsewhere outside of Germany.
It
Um,
is.
the differences that you find maybe in the breakdown of Pils malt versus Munich malt, as long as they have those two things in there, those are really unique to the beer style. American brewers tend to use 2-row or 6-row malt and make an American black lager. I got to be honest with you, I could be drinking an American black lager all day and not know it. If it's from one of these breweries that we've mentioned, whether it be Shiner, Revolver, or Pegasus City, which is another Dallas brewery that makes a good black lager, they all fall within the parameters that are described by the BJCP, and they all taste amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I said, if you're one of those people that you like the Pilsner style, so you like, or you like the big macro beers, like your Miller, your Coors, your what have you, your Hams, your Schlitz, if you really want to go that far down the slide.
Talk slower. You said Hams. I love that beer.
It's Hams, the beer refreshing.
The beer, it's from the land of sky blue waters.
Yes. So my grandfather used to actually have a big sign in his home bar that was a ham sign. That was one of those motion signs. So it was the Hams bear standing by the edge of the water, and the water was on a little. It was one of those
like carousel things.
Yeah. So, but you know those pictures where if you hold it one way, you see one image, and you hold it another way, you see the other. So it was that. So if you're looking at it head on, it looked like the water was waving. If you're looking at it from the left, it was bottles of beer going across. And if you looked at it from the right, it was the Hams bear floating in the water.
Oh my God. Okay, so a couple things you just uncovered there. One, tell me you're from the upper Midwest without telling me you're from the upper Midwest. Your grandfather had a bar in his home bar. Fantastic. That shit doesn't happen down here in Texas. I mean, it will with my kid, but it didn't happen when I was growing up. But also, Hams is. I get caught up. Hams got me through an 80-pound weight loss in the last 3 years. I switched from chasing all these super crafty barrel-aged stouts, and I was like, well, I love the taste of beer. Hams is the taste of beer for me. It's cheap and it's relatively low calorie, especially when you're comparing it to like AleSmith Speedway Stout, which is like 1,300 calories per can.
Right.
I credit Hams with my weight loss in the last 3 years. So cheers to Hams.
So you're down 80 pounds. Is that what you said?
Yeah. And that's that was a big change in my life.
I can relate. So 10 years ago, I weighed 400 pounds and I took off 180 pounds at 11 months.
That's amazing.
I've been pretty damn successful. I've put on about 40 pounds over the whole COVID thing, but other than that, I've been successful at keeping it off.
I mean, listen, weight is something that bro, everybody understands whether they choose to or not. Everybody understands shit happens. Shit happens, whether it's injuries, whether it's health related, whether it's environmental related, things happen. But it's really about maintaining the happiness and whatever is going to keep you waking up tomorrow and getting you through the day. That's what really matters. And if doing that also helps you lose weight at the same time, I think that is you found the perfect balance between the two. And that's for me, that's beer. and I'm really lucky to find myself in a place where I can talk beer to relative strangers on the internet, or talk beer to family members who reach out and are like, hey, I'm in Maryland this weekend. What beer should I be looking out for? And these people do not drink beer. They're not beer drinkers, but they trust that I'm going to provide them a good beer experience wherever they are. And that makes me really happy. So yeah, dude, congratulations on your weight loss. And it doesn't matter how much has been put on. I guarantee it was life-changing, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, you know, I went from wearing a size 50 waist down to a size 34. So, and
That's incredible.
right now I'm pushing the 34 a little hard. I should be in a 36, but
Hey, I mean, here in North America, we're in North Texas, I should say, we're going back into some lockdown procedures. So maybe put on the old stretchy shorts. You'll be fine. You'll be good. We're just
that's
doing,
right. That's
we're
right.
just doing chest up video interviews. It's fine. No big deal.
just from like right here, because nobody wants to see the beer belly, man.
Yeah, I know. I even went and put on my No Beer Left Behind t-shirt today, and I was like, well, I have one that looks good on me, and then I have another that looks good on me sitting down. And I was like, we'll just choose that one. We'll just do that one today. You know how that goes.
I do. I know exactly how that goes. All right. Well, you know, I think we've reached the end of this episode. Typically my episodes are about 30 minutes long. This one's going to be closer to an hour, which is awesome. I mean, it happens. This is not the first time this has happened. But you know, I think it's been a pretty productive episode. We've talked about all sorts of different stuff beer related. We figured out that Bryan from No Beer Left Behind really likes hams, which and apparently he's got a fetish for Guinness. So you know,
that is that's more of a lifestyle choice, is what that is.
All right. Well, I would like to thank anybody who watches this video on YouTube. If you liked it, please subscribe. Please like it. If you want to be notified when new episodes come out, click the little bell so you get that notification in your inbox. If you have a suggestion for a beer style you'd like us to talk about in a future episode, please leave it in the comments. If you have any other comments, questions, concerns, rants, whatever it is, you want to tell me about your cat drinking your beer, leave that in the comments too. I like reading that kind of stuff. It's entertaining. But until next time, I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers. What?